For years, I paid my son's bills, cared for his twins, and opened my home to his wife. Then they decided my house savings and even my future already belonged to them. They expected me to surrender quietly. Instead, I taught them a lesson they would never forget. The roast chicken was still warm in the center of the mahogany table when Kendra unzipped her leather portfolio. My son Brian kept his eyes fixed on his water glass, turning it slowly against the linen napkin. We had gathered for our usual Sunday dinner in my craftsman-style home in suburban Columbus, but Kendra had not touched her buttered carrots. Instead, she placed 3 color-coded spreadsheets neatly beside the gravy boat, sliding one copy directly toward me. "We've spent the last month evaluating family assets," Margaret Kendra said, offering a practiced professional smile. "With property values peaking this quarter and your recent knee surgery, it makes little sense to keep carrying this 4-bedroom place alone. We're ready to receive our inheritance now, while the market is hot, rather than dealing with probate later." I looked at the numbers printed beneath my late husband Thomas's name. Kendra had calculated the estimated sale value of my home, divided my certificates of deposit into quarterly disbursements, and even penciled in an allocation for a single occupancy unit at Shady Pines Senior Community. She tapped her polished nail against the bottom total. "Brian and I can use the equity to clear our mortgage and fund the twins' private academy tuition," she continued smoothly. "You'll have 0 maintenance worries, and we take over the administrative burden immediately. It's the cleanest transition for everyone involved." Brian cleared his throat, but said nothing. He reached for a dinner roll, avoiding my gaze entirely. For 30 years, this house had echoed with footsteps, laughter, and hard work. Thomas and I had paid off the final mortgage note at this very table 5 years before he passed away. I looked at my daughter-in-law, whose eyes were bright with anticipation, and then at my son, who simply nodded along. I did not raise my voice, nor did I push the papers away. I simply smiled, reached for my water, and took a slow, steady sip. Sitting in the quiet living room after they left, I listened to the grandfather clock ticking against the hallway wall. Sunday night had always been peaceful, but tonight, the silence felt heavier, carrying the weight of years I had deliberately chosen to overlook. Kendra's spreadsheets were not a sudden impulse. They were the culmination of small, incremental boundary crossings that I had allowed in the name of keeping family harmony intact. It had begun 4 years ago when Brian married Kendra. First, it was the casual expectation that I would provide free childcare every weekday afternoon for their twins. Then came the shared streaming accounts, the family cell phone plan that I continued paying, and the lawn care services billed directly to my credit card. Whenever an unexpected vehicle repair or holiday expense arose, Brian would mention it over dessert, and I would write a check to lighten his load. Because I was a widow with a comfortable pension from 32 years of teaching middle school science, they had gradually concluded that my resources were simply surplus waiting to be claimed. Over the past 6 months, Kendra had begun referring to my garden as wasted square footage that could fit a rental duplex, and my antique dining set as clutter that won't fit the next stage. Brian had once been an independent, thoughtful boy who helped his father paint the porch every summer. Now he sat passively while his wife drafted spreadsheets designed to liquidate everything his parents had built. He did not defend me because convenience had eroded his backbone. He had grown accustomed to letting 2 women manage his comfort, his mother through unpaid support, and his wife through assertive ambition. I stood up, picked up the 3 color-coded sheets left on the sideboard, and folded them into crisp quarters. I did not shed a tear. Instead, I placed them neatly inside my planner beside my address book. At 8:30 on Monday morning, I sat across from Daniel Foster in his downtown office. Daniel had handled Thomas's estate 7 years ago, and his gray hair had thinned considerably since then, but his sharp, attentive eyes remained unchanged. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the oak desk between us. "You're sure about restructuring the entire estate?" Margaret Daniel asked, adjusting his reading glasses as he reviewed my existing, revocable living trust. "I am entirely certain, Daniel," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "The current trust leaves everything unconditionally to Brian upon my passing, with immediate power of attorney should my health decline. Last night, I realized that structure invites predatory anticipation rather than genuine family care. I want to alter the terms completely. For the next 2 hours, we worked through every asset. My home, the municipal bonds, and the retirement savings were moved into an irrevocable living trust with an independent corporate trustee at Fifth Third Bank. Under the new terms, the house could never be sold during my lifetime, and upon my death, the real estate would transfer directly to the Municipal Botanical Conservatory to fund an urban community garden program. For Brian, I established a modest incentive fund that would disperse small annual educational stipends exclusively for his children's accredited college tuition, paid directly to the institutions once they turned 18. Not a single penny of cash, liquid equity, or disposable capital would pass to Brian or Kendra directly. Furthermore, I formally revoked Brian's medical and financial power of attorney, transferring those responsibilities to Daniel's firm. This will take effect immediately once filed on Thursday, Daniel noted, stamping the preliminary documents. They will receive official written notice of the change of fiduciary status by Friday morning. That suits me perfectly, I said, signing the legal drafts with a steady, unhesitating hand. On Tuesday afternoon, I began making practical changes around my own house. For 3 years, Tuesdays and Thursdays had been dedicated entirely to babysitting 7-year-old Liam and Lucas. I would drive across town, pick them up from elementary school, help them with their homework, prepare dinner, and fold laundry until Kendra returned from her real estate showings at 7 in the evening. Instead of driving to the school pickup line, I called the school administrative office at noon. I informed them that starting this week, I would no longer be on the authorized daily pickup roster and that the parents would need to arrange the after-school care program. Next, I dialed the local mobile carrier and removed both Brian's and Kendra's phone lines from my primary account, setting them to separate billing cycles, effective immediately. I called the landscaping company that mowed their corner lot on my card and canceled the recurring monthly service. Finally, I logged into my bank portal and closed the joint savings account I had opened with Brian when he entered college. At 3:15, my phone rang. It was Kendra, her voice tight with disbelief over the dashboard speaker. Margaret. The school just called saying you aren't on the pickup list today. I'm in the middle of a client walkthrough. What happened? I have enrolled in a pottery workshop on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the community center. Kendra said, calmly looking out at my hydrangeas. I won't be available for after-school care going forward. The district offers an excellent program right in the cafeteria. You didn't give us any notice, she snapped, her composure slipping. That program costs $400 a month per child. Then you'll need to adjust your monthly budget accordingly, I replied gently. Have a good afternoon. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter, feeling an unexpected sense of physical lightness. Wednesday morning brought a brisk autumn breeze that scattered red maple leaves across my driveway. I spent the morning clearing out my garage, boxing up old gardening tools, duplicate cookware, and extra linens that had accumulated over decades. I loaded the boxes into my Subaru and drove them to the local women's shelter downtown, enjoying the simple rhythm of manual work. At 2 o'clock, I returned to Daniel Foster's office for the final execution of the documents. 2 paralegals served as independent witnesses as Daniel laid out the thick stack of bound legal instruments. Everything is formalized, Margaret Daniel said, pointing to the highlighted signature tabs. The irrevocable trust is funded. The deed to your home has been retitled under the Vance Family Trust, with the bank as custodian. The power of attorney documents have been formally executed, and all relevant institutions will receive certified copies. I picked up the pen and signed my name across 12 distinct documents. Each signature felt like setting down a heavy stone I had carried unnecessarily. For years, I had worried about whether Brian would have enough financial security to navigate adulthood comfortably. But true security could never be gifted at the expense of a parent's independence and self-worth. What if they attempt to challenge your mental capacity at the time these documents were signed? Daniel asked, routinely reviewing the notarized seals. I had Dr. Evans complete a full cognitive evaluation. During my physical last Friday, I replied, sliding the sealed medical report across the desk. I am entirely sound of mind, Daniel. This decision is not born of anger or confusion. It is born of clarity. Daniel looked at the doctor's certificate, gave a respectful nod, and stamped the final seal. The paperwork was complete. The boundary was now legally binding and protected by formal documentation. Thursday was quiet, filled with ordinary tasks that felt newly purposeful. I woke up at 6, brewed a fresh pot of dark roast coffee, and walked through my house with a clear eye. Without the constant obligation to host cater or accommodate unannounced visits, the space felt entirely my own again. For months, Kendra had used my guest bedroom as an overflow storage depot for her staging inventory, plastic tubs of fake plants, excess throw pillows, and generic framed art she used for open houses. By noon, I had moved every single tub and box out of the guest room and stacked them neatly on the covered side porch near the driveway. I then called a local contractor to replace the keypad lock on my front door and garage. For years, Brian and Kendra had possessed the digital entry code, walking into my kitchen without knocking at any hour of the day. By 2 in the afternoon, the new electronic deadbolt was installed, programmed with a single access code known only to me. While the contractor finished the trim, my phone buzzed with 2 text messages from Brian. Mom, the carrier says our phone lines have been removed from your account. What happened? Also, Kendra says the landscaper didn't show up at our house today. Can you check on that? I did not respond with a long explanation. I simply typed a brief reply. I've separated our household accounts, Brian. You and Kendra will need to arrange and pay for your own services going forward. He did not reply immediately. I watched the contractor pack his tools, paid him by check, and locked the front door from the inside. For the first time in years, the house felt secure, quiet, and completely protected from casual intrusion. On Friday morning at 9 o'clock, 2 heavy envelopes were delivered to Brian and Kendra's suburban home by certified mail. I knew this because Daniel's office sent me an electronic confirmation of delivery at 9:15. The packets contained formal legal notifications from the law firm of Foster and Associates. They informed Brian that his nomination as future executor had been revoked along with his authority under the durable power of attorney. They also outlined the transfer of all real estate into the irrevocable trust, alongside formal notices of cancellation for all shared financial accounts. At 9:45, my landline rang 3 times before switching to voicemail. It was Kendra, her voice sharp, rapid, and strained. Margaret, we just received some absurd legal packet from Daniel Foster's office. It says the house has been placed in an irrevocable trust for a conservatory. This has to be a clerical mistake. Brian is beside himself. Call me back immediately so we can get this sorted out before the weekend. I let the recording finish without picking up the receiver. I stood by the kitchen window, watering my African violets with a small brass can. Outside, a gentle rain had started to fall, darkening the bark of the maple trees. I felt no urge to panic, apologize, or explain myself over the telephone. For months, they had treated my life as an administrative formality to be resolved at their convenience. Now the law had established what common decency had failed to provide, an immovable wall protecting my autonomy. I placed the watering can back on the sill, poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, and sat down in the armchair by the window with a book. The morning was cool, quiet, and entirely under my control. By 11 o'clock, tires crunched loudly against the wet gravel of my driveway. I looked out the living room window to see Kendra's white SUV parked haphazardly near the garage. She stepped out into the drizzle, clutching the manila legal folder in one hand, while Brian stepped out of the passenger side, his shoulders hunched beneath a dark rain jacket. Kendra marched up the brick walkway, her face flushed with indignation. She marched straight to the electronic keypad by the front door, punched in the old 4-digit code, and tugged on the brass handle. The lock beeped 3 times with an error chime remaining firmly bolted shut. She punched the code in a second time, harder this time, before realizing the lock mechanism had been entirely replaced. Frustrated, she raised her fist and began pounding heavily against the solid oak panels. "Margaret, open the door," Kendra shouted, her voice carrying through the glass transom above. "We know you're inside. We need to talk about what you've done." Behind her, Brian stood on the lower step of the porch, looking down at his wet shoes. He made no move to stop his wife, nor did he look directly at the window where the curtains hung straight. I did not rush to the door. I walked to the hallway closet, retrieved my cardigan, buttoned it slowly, and checked the wall clock. It was precisely 11:15. I walked into the entryway, standing calmly behind the reinforced glass storm door. Through the glass, I could see Kendra's breath clouding in the cold air as she raised her fist to pound a third time. I waited until her knuckles rested against the wood, then turned the deadbolt with a clear, deliberate click and pulled the inner door open. Kendra stopped with her hand suspended in midair, startled by my sudden appearance. Brian took a half step back, shifting his weight awkwardly on the porch boards. "Margaret, thank goodness," Kendra began, pushing the legal folder forward. "You need to call Daniel Foster right now. This document claims you've locked your entire estate into a trust for some community garden. We had an explicit plan on Sunday. You cannot simply discard your own family's financial future out of spite." I stood straight in the doorway, my hands resting loosely in my cardigan pockets. I did not raise my voice or invite them inside. "There was no plan on Sunday, Kendra," I said evenly. "There was an inventory of what you felt entitled to claim from a living woman. My home and savings are not an inheritance waiting for collection. They are the result of 40 years of work that Thomas and I put into building our life together." Kendra's eyes widened with defensive anger. "Brian is your only child. Who else is supposed to inherit what you have?" I turned my gaze directly to my son. "Brian, did you come here to ask how I am doing, or did you come because the safety net you never earned has been removed?" Brian opened his mouth, looked at his wife, and then looked back at me. "Mom, we just thought you needed help managing things. We didn't mean to upset you. You did not come to help me, Brian. You came to divide my life while I was still standing in the room," I said clearly. "The trust is irrevocable. The decisions are final. The trust will help cover your children's college tuition when the time comes, but you and Kendra will build your own household on your own earnings." Kendra stared at me, speechless for the first time as the finality of my words settled over the porch. "You're cutting us out over a misunderstanding," Kendra said, her voice dropping into a sharp, cold whisper. "No, Kendra," I answered, looking her directly in the eye. "I am no longer allowing you to treat my life like a financial transaction. Your staging tubs are stacked neatly on the covered side porch. Please take them with you when you leave today." Brian looked at the stacked plastic bins near his feet, then looked at the new brass lock on the door. He recognized the boundary for what it was: unyielding, lawful, and entirely earned. Without a word, he stepped over, picked up 2 of the plastic containers, and walked them down the driveway toward their car. Kendra lingered for a few seconds, searching my face for any trace of hesitation or guilt. But finding none, she turned sharply on her heel and followed him into the rain. I watched them load the boxes back out of the gravel drive and disappear down the suburban road. When the sound of their engine faded entirely, I closed the heavy oak door and locked the deadbolt. As the rain began to ease, a narrow beam of sunlight broke through the clouds and reached across the dining room floor. I cleared away the last traces of paper from the sideboard and sat down at the table with my morning calendar. Next Tuesday, my pottery class began at 9. On Wednesday, I had a volunteer orientation at the Urban Conservatory downtown. On Thursday, I was hosting my retired teacher's book club for the first time in 2 years. My life was no longer an asset waiting to be managed by other people. It was full structured and entirely my own. I opened my planner, wrote down my grocery list for the weekend, and smiled in the quiet, sunlit room.